I discovered a platinum band hidden in the inner pocket of his coat, and my heart raced, believing that after 3 long years, he was finally prepared to call me his forever. But the moment I questioned whether it belonged to me, the expression that crossed his face revealed everything I feared. The ring was never intended for my finger, and truthfully, neither was his heart. Yet that revelation isn't even close to the most devastating part. What unfolded afterward showed me I'd been existing in a reality far more sinister than my worst nightmares. But before we continue with this journey, if you're finding value in this content, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and activate notifications so you won't miss stories that hit this deep. And drop a comment telling me which city you're tuning in from. I absolutely love connecting with you from every corner of the globe. Now, let's get into it. Seoul never truly rested, but on this particular evening, it seemed unusually hushed. Rain tapped gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxury apartment, and within its reflection, 2 silhouettes danced, hers and his. She positioned herself near the glass, the illumination from the sprawling cityscape washing her brown complexion in amber tones. 3 years of clandestine evenings had trained Nala in the art of invisibility, how to exist without sound beside a man whose very name commanded fear from those who spoke it. His name was Jiwon, the youngest syndicate leader in Korea, piercing gaze, tailored clothing, and a soul that remained untouched by anyone except her. Nala was a young black woman from Atlanta who arrived in Seoul pursuing dreams of fashion design that somehow dissolved between ambition and him. She'd come on a study abroad program at 23, drawn by K-fashion and the promise of opportunity. Instead, she found him. He represented peril disguised in sophistication, the sort of man who simultaneously sheltered you while gradually dismantling everything you were. Falling for him hadn't been part of any strategy, but emotion operates without blueprints. It simply manifests. Throughout 3 years, she remained concealed from the world. Her identity stayed anonymous. Her existence went unacknowledged. Society perceived Jiwon as unreachable, merciless, brilliant beyond measure. Yet when doors closed behind them, he transformed into simply a man who explored her body as though it contained the only honesty he believed in. On certain nights, when sleep claimed him beside her, she'd observe him and question who truly existed beneath that carefully constructed silence, beneath the brutality. Her fingers would trace the tattoos that decorated his shoulders, Korean characters she'd learned to read just to understand him better. She convinced herself she understood him completely. She convinced herself his feelings were genuine. But even she sensed the transformation approaching. The manner his device would illuminate, and he'd distance himself to respond. The way his attention drifted elsewhere when she spoke. This evening, he'd been absent for many hours. The kimchi jjigae she'd prepared, taught by his grandmother during one rare visit, had turned unappetizing and cold. When the entrance finally swung open, he moved inside like vapor, composed, impossible to interpret. His charcoal shirt clung damply to his frame from the downpour. "You've returned quite late," she offered quietly in Korean, her accent still present but softer now after 3 years. Business required my attention. He never elaborated on which variety of business. Explanation wasn't necessary. She approached him cautiously, her braids swept over one shoulder. "You've seemed so far away recently." He observed her, his features betraying nothing. "You allow anxiety to consume you too easily." Yet his tone carried no heat, like someone already mentally departed to another place entirely. She manufactured a smile. "There was a time you'd reach out every single hour." He moved past her position, shedding his coat. "There was a time you comprehended the demands of my world." Her chest constricted painfully. She discovered long before not to press with excessive inquiries. Being a black woman in his world already made her invisible to most. She didn't need to make herself smaller, but this evening, her instincts screamed that something fundamental had shifted. As he vanished into the bathroom, she collected his coat from where it lay to hang it properly, seeking distraction from her racing thoughts. But something with substantial weight in the lining halted her movements. Her fingertips grazed against soft fabric. She extracted it slowly, a compact navy box. Her breathing stopped completely. Beneath the subdued lighting, nestled inside, sat a platinum band with diamonds that caught the light. Immaculate, clearly expensive, never worn. Initially she smiled, disbelief flickering through her expression. A ring? Perhaps after all this time invested, he'd finally decided. Perhaps her mother in Atlanta had been wrong when she'd warned her about getting involved with someone whose world she'd never truly belonged to. Perhaps. But when he emerged, dampness still clinging to his shoulders, she raised the box with unsteady hands. "Does this belong to me?" He stiffened momentarily, then his lips curved slightly. "What compelled you to go through my belongings?" She disregarded his deflection. "Simply answer my question. Does this belong to me?" His lack of response communicated volumes. He stepped past her frame, removing the box from her grip as delicately as one might disarm something dangerous. "It holds no significance," he stated flatly. "Don't create unnecessary drama." Her mouth went completely dry. "No significance? You're purchasing rings without purpose now?" "Nala," he said, voice dropping to something low and threatening. "Don't begin this." That particular tone. The identical one that made his subordinates recoil. Now directed, squarely at her, her pulse accelerated wildly, yet she maintained her ground. Her mother had raised her not to shrink. Who is this woman? He rotated to confront her directly, eyes darkening considerably. "You're forgetting your position here." Her voice fractured. "My position? What position is that, Jiwon? The foreign woman you keep hidden? The black girl nobody knows exists?" He offered no response whatsoever. Instead, he accessed a drawer, placed the box carefully inside, and poured himself soju. And through that small gesture, that calm rejection, comprehension dawned on her. It wasn't meant for her hands. She wasn't his tomorrow. She was his hidden truth. The secret he kept locked away like shame. The quiet stretching between them grew oppressive, saturated with everything she desperately wanted to deny. He consumed his drink methodically, refusing to acknowledge her gaze. "I won't be returning tonight," he finally announced, placing the empty glass down with finality. "Don't bother waiting awake." She remained voiceless as he departed. She simply stood frozen, watching rainfall distort his reflection across the glass surface. And for the first time throughout 3 years, she recognized she was genuinely isolated. When she returned to the window once more, the urban lights smeared through her gathering tears, and somewhere far below, text scrolled across an electronic billboard in Korean and English. Syndicate leader Jiwon announces engagement to corporate heiress Park Min-seo. Her breath seized in her lungs. The ring was never hers, and truthfully, he never was either. The morning following that headline, Nala didn't awaken to daylight streaming in. She awakened to emptiness, the variety of emptiness that amplifies your own heartbeat until it sounds deafening. The apartment felt alien now. Every space contained his presence, his energy, his deceptions. The announcement had spread everywhere imaginable. His engagement had already transformed into the primary conversation among Seoul's privileged circles. A flawless pairing, a strategic merger, a romance the public could embrace wholeheartedly, Korean royalty uniting with Korean royalty. Except the woman who genuinely cared for him couldn't even reveal her existence. She stared at the article displayed on her device until the text became incomprehensible. Jiwon and Park Min-seo to wed in December. An image accompanied it, his palm resting against Min-seo's lower back, his expression subtle yet assured. She was everything Nala could never be in his world. Korean, connected, acceptable. It wasn't the expression he reserved for Nala. It was the mask he wore when performing for society. Her chest felt hollow. 3 years erased, discarded, dismissed through one public declaration. She didn't weep immediately. Instead, strange laughter escaped, a sound sharp enough to pierce the silence surrounding her. Her best friend, Imani, back in Atlanta, had tried to warn her. "Girl, you know how this ends," she'd said. "Over FaceTime 2 years ago. You're gonna be the secret." Then came the tears, constant and soundless. She could still recall his parting words from the previous evening. "Don't bother waiting awake." That was his method of concluding their story, as though she represented nothing beyond minor inconvenience. By nightfall, the city beyond had transformed completely. Media presence, brilliant flashes, celebration everywhere. But within the shadows of his empire, Nala awaited his return. When he finally entered, his footsteps remained composed, calculated as though nothing significant had occurred. He loosened his neckwear and acknowledged her presence. "You haven't departed yet." She held her device upward, the engagement announcement bright across the display. "You deceived me completely." He didn't even glance toward it. No deception occurred. "This is strategic necessity." Her voice cracked painfully. "Strategic necessity? You proposed marriage to another woman." His tone stayed measured. "Her father maintains control over the trade routes through Busan. You believe I can prioritize sentiment in my current position?" She observed him with pure disbelief, her dark eyes flashing with anger she'd suppressed for too long. "You claimed you cared for me." He finally acknowledged her directly, and his expression softened momentarily. "I do care." Then explain her existence. "Because emotion doesn't preserve my life," he responded with ice in his voice. "Power accomplishes that." That precise moment revealed she'd invested love in someone who didn't believe emotion mattered. Only dominance did. She moved closer, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "What am I to you then, Jiwon? What have I represented these past 3 years?" He exhaled heavily, the sound carrying weight. "Don't force this conversation." "I'm forcing it," she whispered intensely. "Tell me what I represent." His eyes hardened into stone. "You belong to me. That's all the understanding you've ever required." Her entire body went rigid. No anger colored his tone, only possession. Nala shook her head slowly, her braids swaying with the movement. "I don't belong to you, not any longer." He smirked faintly, walking past her position. "You don't possess authority to decide that." When she attempted speaking again, he pivoted, his hand cupping her jaw gently, almost lovingly, yet with unmistakable warning in his touch. "Don't abandon me," he said with quiet intensity. "You won't appreciate the consequences if you attempt it." Her voice emerged soft but certain. "Then you'll need to locate someone else to dominate." He froze for a single heartbeat, his jaw muscles tightening visibly. But then he released her and turned away, selecting silence over emotional expression. She watched him pour another drink, his ritual following every confrontation. He didn't acknowledge her again. And in that moment she understood the man she'd loved had already vanished, buried beneath obligation, ambition, and the inability to choose her publicly. She walked into the bedroom, opened the drawer where she once stored her possessions, and retrieved a small silk pouch. Inside rested the jade bracelet he'd presented her the evening he said, "You're the singular person who allows me to forget my identity." His grandmother's bracelet, he'd claimed. Now it felt like evidence of fabrication. She positioned it carefully on the mattress. No written message, no farewell. She surveyed the room one final time. The urban lights, his lingering scent in the atmosphere, the echo of all those nights she believed held meaning. Then she collected her bag, the one she'd brought from Atlanta 3 years ago, now worn but faithful. She walked out. No tears this time, just quiet footsteps and the sensation of freedom attempting to rediscover its way back into her chest. Below, the rain had returned once more. Soul appeared softer in the storm, as though the heavens themselves wanted to weep on her behalf. She vanished into the darkness, nameless once again, but lighter, somehow. When Jiwon returned to the bedroom many hours later, he noticed the vacant space where her belongings once resided. His eyes settled on the jade bracelet, his grandmother's bracelet that he'd given to the only woman who'd ever made him feel human. He didn't reach for it, didn't call her name, didn't prevent her departure. He simply stood motionless, staring at what she'd left behind, the silence louder than any weapon's discharge. For the first time in years, he experienced something unfamiliar crawling through him: remorse. The following morning, he dispatched his men to locate her, but she'd disappeared completely. No trail, no contact information, no communication. Only the bracelet remained, a green stone catching morning light like a ghost of what they'd been. When Nayla departed Seoul, she refused to glance backward. The metropolis that once resembled love now felt like imprisonment. Every illumination, every corner, every whisper reminded her of him. She boarded the first train that would transport her sufficiently distant to a peaceful coastal village in Busan, where the atmosphere carried brine instead of gunpowder. No security personnel, no luxury vehicles, no gold-plated fabrications, just the ocean and her heartbeat attempting to relearn tranquility once more. She'd called Imani from the train station. "Girl, I'm done. I'm finally done." She located a modest room positioned above a coffee shop run by an elderly Korean woman who'd spent years in Nigeria and didn't pose questions when she saw Nala's face. Instead, she'd smiled warmly and said in English, "You're safe here, child." It wasn't much by any measure, but it was entirely hers. She altered her contact information, wrapped her braids in colorful African print scarves she'd packed away, and began employment at a small art supply shop. Each day, she absorbed the rhythm of ordinary existence. Patrons, warm beverages, genuine laughter, liberation. But sometimes, when the entrance chime sounded, she'd freeze completely. For a brief instant, she'd anticipate seeing him. Tall, cold, with that look that once made her forget her own identity. He never appeared, at least not immediately. Weeks transformed into months. Her laughter gradually returned, small initially, but authentic. She even began creating art again, something she hadn't practiced since before encountering him. She painted women who looked like her, Black women in Korean settings, claiming space unapologetically. The pigments on her canvas resembled healing, chaotic, but vibrantly alive. At night, she'd position herself by the window and absorb the sound of waves colliding. Occasionally, she'd wonder whether he missed her presence. Then she'd dismiss the thought entirely. You can't miss what you never truly valued. But Jiwon wasn't the variety of man who released things easily. When he instructed his men to locate her, he didn't mean eventually. He meant immediately. They investigated every contact, every address she'd ever utilized. Her name was eliminated from Seoul as though she'd never existed there. But that only intensified his anger. "She believes she can hide from me," he said quietly, his voice colder than the soju in his grasp. His most trusted lieutenant shifted nervously. "She's covered her tracks exceptionally well, sir. No calls, no transactions, nothing whatsoever. She deleted her social media." Jiwon's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Everyone creates a trail somewhere. Discover hers." Back in the coastal village, Nala's world had contracted beautifully, an existence constructed from simplicity. Mornings saturated with the fragrance of fresh paint and sea air. Afternoons with laughter from customers who'd begun to know her name. She smiled more frequently now. The worry lines on her face had diminished noticeably. One evening, as she secured the art supply shop, the elderly woman handed her a small parcel. "Someone left this for you earlier," she mentioned, her expression concerned. Nala frowned deeply. She wasn't anticipating anything whatsoever. The parcel was plain, wrapped in brown paper, her new name written precisely across the front. Inside was a single white lotus flower, her preferred flower, and a small card with 2 words in bold Korean characters she'd learned to read. "Found you." Her blood turned ice cold. She scanned the peaceful street around her. The ocean breeze blew, carrying the faint hum of an engine somewhere in the shadows. A black vehicle sat parked across the pathway, headlights extinguished. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. She dropped the flower, heart pounding so intensely it physically hurt. No, not now, not again. She ran upstairs to her apartment, secured the door, and drew the curtains closed. Her phone rang, an unidentified number. She didn't want to answer, but fear made her fingers move independently. "Hello," she answered in English, her voice shaking. A pause, then his voice, calm, deep, unmistakable, responding in Korean. "You genuinely believed you could hide from me?" Her knees weakened considerably. Ji-won. "I've exercised patience," he said, switching to English for her benefit. Excessive patience. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to release. "You're engaged. You're constructing a new life. Release me." "I'm incapable of that," he said quietly. "You belong where I can observe you." Her voice broke completely. "I'm not yours any longer. I was never truly yours. I was your secret." He chuckled softly, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. "You still believe you have choice in this matter." The call ended abruptly. No farewell, just silence. She threw the phone across the room, breathing hard, every muscle shaking violently. She wanted to believe he was bluffing, that he wouldn't dare come here. But when she looked out the window again, the car had vanished, and that terrified her more. The next morning, she attempted to proceed with her day as usual. The old woman noticed her pallid appearance beneath her brown skin, the fear in her eyes, but said nothing initially. Nala told herself she wouldn't flee again. She'd built an existence here. But by evening, she knew the truth. A new man had joined the coffee shop staff next door. He smiled politely, mentioned he was from Seoul. She caught the faint scar near his jawline, the same mark one of Ji-won's men possessed. She'd seen that face before, lurking in the background of her old life. Her hands tightened around her apron. They'd found her. That night, she packed a small bag and hid it by the door. She couldn't stay. She couldn't allow him to find her again because this time she wasn't certain she'd have the strength to depart. But as she reached for the light switch, her phone vibrated again. A message. No name, no number, just one sentence in English. "I'm standing outside." She turned slowly toward the window. The rain had started to fall again, heavy and relentless. Through the curtain, a dark figure stood under a street lamp, tall, unmoving, watching. Her heart stopped. She stepped back, whispering to herself in English, "Please, not again." But deep down she knew, you can run from the man, not from the power that owns him. A knock echoed at her door, soft, deliberate, familiar. Then his voice, calm but cold through the rain, speaking Korean. "Open the door, Nala. We need to talk." The knocking didn't stop. 3 slow taps, a pause, then another. He was patient, the kind of patient that terrified her. Nala stood frozen behind the door, heart pounding so hard it hurt. She could see his shadow beneath the crack, still and calm, like he had all the time in the world. "Nala." Ji-won's voice came low and steady, switching to English. "If I must break this door down, I will. If you're still with me on this emotional journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. This story is about to take a turn you absolutely won't see coming, and I don't want you to miss what happens next. Let's continue." She wanted to scream, to demand he leave, but part of her knew it wouldn't matter. The kind of power he carried didn't require permission. Her trembling hand reached for the lock. The door opened with a quiet click. He stood there, black coat soaked from the rain, hair slicked back, eyes sharp as glass. He looked like a man carved from the night itself. For a second, neither of them spoke. The air between them was too heavy for words. Then he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I've been searching for you," he said softly in English, knowing it made her more comfortable. Nala's voice shook. "I told you not to. I told you not to run," he replied, calm but cold, reverting to Korean. She took a step back, responding in Korean to show she wasn't intimidated. "You have no right to be here." He looked around the tiny apartment. The peeling wallpaper, the cheap curtains, the African print fabric she'd hung to make it feel like home, the life she had built without him. "This is where you've been hiding?" he asked, his tone quiet, almost offended. "It's my home now," she said firmly. He turned to her, eyes narrowing. "You call this home?" "Yes," she whispered, "because it's mine." Something flickered in his expression. Pain, confusion, maybe pride. It was gone before she could name it. "You left without a word," he said, stepping closer. "Do you know what that did to me?" She forced herself not to move back. "I had to leave before you destroyed what was left of me. Before you made me forget I deserved to be chosen publicly, not hidden like shame." Jiwon's jaw tightened. "You think you can live without me?" "I already am," she said, her chin lifting with the pride her mother had instilled in her. He studied her face, the calm defiance in her dark eyes, the quiet strength she had grown since she left him. The way she stood taller now, no longer shrinking to fit his world, it made him angrier. "I was going to end the engagement," he said suddenly in English. Her breath caught. "What? I told her father last week. I don't care about the trade routes or the alliance or any of it. I want you." Nala's heart twisted, but she shook her head, braids swaying. "You're lying. You always lie when you want control." He moved closer. "I came here alone, didn't I? No guards, no weapons, just me." "That doesn't make it love," she whispered. "That makes it obsession. And it doesn't change the fact that you were ashamed of me." Jiwon's voice softened. "You don't understand. I tried to forget you. I tried to bury you under business and blood and duty. But every night I saw you. Every woman, every drink, every deal, it all felt empty without you." For a brief moment she saw the man she once loved, raw, human, broken beneath the power he carried. But she knew better now. She had learned the difference between love and possession, between being cherished and being hidden. "I don't belong to you," she said gently. "I never did." His expression hardened. "That's not true." He reached for her hand, and when his fingers touched hers, she flinched. The same touch that once felt like safety now felt like chains. "Let me go," she said. "I can't," he whispered. "You have to." He stared at her, eyes filled with conflict, the boss and the man fighting for dominance inside him. Then, in a voice so quiet it almost disappeared, he said in Korean, "If I can't have you, no one will." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nala's breath caught. "Do you hear yourself?" she responded in English, her voice shaking. "That's not love, Jiwon. That's fear." He turned away, hands shaking slightly as he ran them through his hair. "You think I'm the villain here? You think I wanted any of this?" She stared at him, switching back to Korean. "You chose it. Every deal, every lie, every person you hurt. You built this cage and then dragged me into it, and you were too ashamed to let anyone know I existed." He looked back at her, eyes burning. "Because I needed something real." Her heart broke a little at that. Then you should have learned how to love without breaking what you touch, without hiding what you claim to love. Silence filled the room, raw, dangerous, endless. Outside, thunder rolled over the sea, then a knock, louder this time, urgent. Jiwon's head snapped toward the door. Before he could move, one of his men burst in, soaked, panting, speaking rapid Korean. "Sir, it's Minseo. She's been taken." Nayla's eyes widened. "What?" the man continued, breathless. "Rival organization hit her convoy on the expressway near Seoul. They're demanding ransom, and they know who she is." Jiwon's calm shattered. His face went pale, his body tensing like a predator sensing blood. "Get the car," he ordered sharply in Korean. The man nodded and ran out. Nala watched him, stunned. "You're going after her." "I have to," he said. "If she dies, a war starts." "And what about us?" Nala asked quietly. He looked at her, eyes stormed dark. "This isn't over." He walked to the door, pausing for just a second. "You shouldn't have run," he said quietly in English, "because now you're part of everything I do, whether you want it or not." Then he was gone. The sound of the door slamming, mixing with the thunder outside. Nala stood there shaking, staring at the empty space where he'd been. He was right about one thing. It wasn't over. Not yet. She looked out the window as his black car disappeared into the storm, headlights swallowed by rain. And without thinking, she whispered in Korean, "Don't die, Jiwon." When Jiwon's car vanished into the rain, Nala didn't go back inside. She thought of her grandmother in Atlanta who'd survived worse men, worse situations. She thought of every woman in her family who'd taught her that sometimes love means following your heart even when your head screams danger. She packed a small bag with the quiet movements of someone used to leaving and followed the direction his car had taken. Not because she wanted to help him, but because she couldn't let this end the way it had started, with him deciding her fate without asking. Jiwon didn't announce where he was going. He moved like a man who had run half his life on instinct and kept secrets in locked rooms. But Nala knew him well enough to track him. She'd spent 3 years learning his patterns, the way he moved through the world, the route through the alleys he favored, the small pojangmacha where he often stopped to pretend to be anonymous, the courier with the folded envelopes he still used when messages had to stay off phones. She followed at a distance, her dark skin helping her blend into shadows, a skill she'd learned living in a country where she already felt invisible. They reached an abandoned warehouse by the harbor, a place the city had forgotten. Lights burned inside. Men moved like shadows. Her heart thudded, not from fear, but from something older, more complicated. She'd imagined this scene 1,000 times, not as a victim, but as the one who could still choose. She had not come to fight. She had come to see if he would choose her freedom. When Jiwon entered, he was all control, a man made to be obeyed. He talked fast, voice low, bargaining in Korean with the men who held Minseo. Tension cut the air. Money was offered. Promises were made. But someone on the other side had lost patience. Words ended. Weapons rose. Nala watched from a broken window, frozen and furious. She had sworn she wouldn't be dragged into his world again. But the world rolled forward whether she stood up or not. She moved closer when the first gunshots split the warehouse, a sound that made the air itself recoil. Chaos spilled out. Jiwon pushed forward, every movement precise, every command cutting. He aimed to protect Minseo, to salvage his alliance. He wanted to stop this before it became a war. But one man hidden at a side entrance fired into the melee. The bullet meant for Jiwon sang through the smoke. Nala didn't think. Years of being the secret, of loving in shadows, had taught her the strange muscle memory of sacrifice. She stepped into the line of fire, the world narrowing to the single truth between their bodies. The bullet hit her shoulder, a hard, hot pain that knocked the wind out of her, but did not stop her from pulling Jiwon back out of the path of the second sweep of fire. Someone's hand slammed into her back, and then they were outside in the rain, breath clouding in the cold. Jiwon held her like a man who'd never let himself be small before, hands trembling, face white but furious. The kidnappers fled as quickly as the chaos had formed, leaving a silence filled only with the rain and the quick, sharp breaths of people still alive. "Jiwon!" someone shouted in Korean, men already working to get Minseo to a safe car. But Jiwon's world had narrowed to the weight in his arms. Nala's cheek wet with rain and something darker. She tasted blood, then salt, then whispered his name in Korean. She tried to smile, an absurd, painful thing. "You still chase what you don't know how to keep," she whispered in English. He pressed his forehead to hers as if that could erase years of ownership and replace them with something else. Don't die on me," he said in Korean, in a voice that had never asked for anything, except now asked for everything. They were in the ambulance an hour later. Minseo was safe, wrapped in heated blankets and complaining quietly in rapid Korean, more from shock than injury. Jiwon sat beside Nala, fingers never leaving the place where the bullet had torn fabric and skin. He barked orders, paid men, signaled to his world that nothing would be left to chance. But his world had already shown him the cost. Nala's vision blurred. She could hear the beeping machines and his voice over the noise, mixing Korean and English as he spoke to her. She had saved him once, unintentionally, and the truth she buried now rose heavy and jagged. "You can walk away," she said, voice thin in English. "Not like this. Not because you can force it. Walk away because you choose me. Publicly. Proudly." He looked at her, as if the idea itself was foreign and terrible. "I don't know how," he admitted in English, the confession cutting him deeper than any wound. Her hand found his then. "Learn," she whispered. The doctor's face came into view, clinical and kind, speaking Korean. They stitched her up, kept her through the night. Jiwon didn't leave the hospital. He stood outside the ward and watched the slow rise and fall of the curtain that hid her from the world. When she finally opened her eyes, his face was very close, exhausted, terrified, human. He whispered in English, voice raw. "If I can't have you by my side, I'll ruin the life that took you from me." Nala closed her eyes again, not sure whether his words were a promise or a threat, and if either one would ever let her be free. The night after the hospital, Jiwon disappeared into the business he'd always chosen over himself. His engagement crumbled under the weight of scandal and the aftermath. Minseo's family retreated, insulted by the rumors swirling about Jiwon's mysterious savior. The alliance cooled. Alliances cost less than a life, but they had cost him more than he expected. His men whispered that he was different, softer in places that should have been steel. He visited the hospital only once more before the doctors insisted she needed quiet, distance, healing that was not sewn in by fear. Nala left the city. She left with a small bag, a new name on her lips, and the memory of pain that would never fully leave. Recovery was slow, not only the stitches, but the part of her that had learned to live small. In a coastal town where the gulls cried overhead and the horizon was a promise, she found a small rented room and a cheap table and began to paint again. Color returned like rain after a drought. She painted her truth, black women loving openly, claiming space, refusing to hide. Jawan tried to follow in his way. He broke deals, cut ties that had once seemed unbreakable. He paid for safe corners and quiet rooms where he could think about what he had done and what he had lost. He wanted to force her back, or at least to fix what he'd broken. But something in him, battered raw by fear and guilt, had learned that the very act of taking, of hiding, had been what killed their chance. Months later, he came to the coastal town. He stood a shadow among other shadows, at a distance that gave him the luxury he had never had for himself, to watch, without changing anything. He saw her in the small gallery she'd opened on a side street, lighter at the edges, eyes quieter, hands that had relearned tenderness. Her natural hair was out now, full and free, no longer pressed or hidden. She wore colors that made her glow. Her laughter came like a small bell. He wanted to cross the street. He wanted to step into her life and take her back. But the memory of the ambulance, of the blood and the stitched skin, held him still. He thought of the last thing she'd asked him, to walk away because he chose her. Publicly, proudly. He had learned to stir empires. He hadn't yet learned to choose without crushing. Instead, he left something on the gallery doorstep. The jade bracelet he had given her and the small navy box he had once hidden and never given to the right person. Inside, he had placed nothing but a folded note written in both Korean and English. She opened it later, alone. The bracelet felt warm in her palm. Her thumb brushed the paper. The note read simply, "I could not keep you by force. I could not become the man who would hold you and never let you breathe. I failed at that. I will live, knowing you are free. J." She laughed once, a sound full of rain and salt and liberation, and then she pressed the bracelet to her chest. She walked into the gallery and hung a new painting above the frame of the window. A city at night. Seoul's skyline unmistakable. A single window lit in a tower, and a black woman on the shore looking back, her back straight, her head high, choosing herself. Jiwon drove away that evening, the road long and empty. He did not call. He did not turn back. He had chosen a different kind of punishment, to live with what he had done and to hold his hands empty. Nala painted until the light faded, then sat by the window and listened to the sea. Freedom did not erase scars. It only made them hers. Some love ends with fireworks and promises. Theirs ended with a quiet that both of them finally respected. A silence that meant she was alive and free. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's knowing when to let go. If this story touched you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in Nala's position. Would you have stayed? Would you have saved him? Let me know. And remember, you deserve a love that sets you free, not one that keeps you hidden. You deserve to be chosen proudly, not secretly. Until next time, take care of yourself.